over the cheekbones. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "And I say again, we are. So we have to do it right. What about a commission?" "No, Grandad. Sergeant is fine." "You're crazy." "I'm Irish, aren't I? We're all a little crazy." His grandfather nodded. "How long have you got home?" 10 days. Then straight back?" Daniel nodded. "I'm going into the Special Forces." The old man frowned. "What's that?" "You don't want to know, Grandad. You don't want to know." "Well, try and have a good time while you're here. See a few girls." "I surely will." Which he did, and then it was back to the green hell of Vietnam. The constant throbbing of the helicopters, death and destruction all around, all the roads inevitably leading to Bo Din and his own personal appointment with destiny. Camp 4 was deep in the bush north of the Mekong Delta, the river snaking through marshland and great banks of reeds and the occasional village. It was raining that day, a monsoon kind of rain that hung like a grey curtain, making it difficult to see much. Camp 4 was a jumping-off point for Special Forces deep penetration operations, and Quinn had been ordered there just as they'd lost their master sergeant. As usual, he'd hitched a lift in a medevac helicopter, but things being stretched, this contained only one pilot and a young medic-cum-air gunner named Jackson, who sat at the heavy machine gun and peered out the open door. The helicopter dropped lower as visibility became worse in the rain. There were paddy fields below, the brown line of the river, and Quinn stood, held on, and looked down. A sudden explosion came over to the right, flames mushrooming, and as the pilot banked, a village emerged from the rain, some of the houses on stilts on the river. Quinn saw canoes and fishermen's flatboats, people crowding into them, some of them already pushing off. He also saw Viet Cong in straw hats and black pajamas, heard the distinctive crack of AK-47s, and below him people began toppling from boats into the water. As the helicopter approached, the VC looked up in alarm, and some of them raised their rifles and fired. Jackson returned fire with his heavy machine gun. "Christ, no!" Quinn told him. "You'll get the civilians, too!" The pilot called over his shoulder, "We'd better get out of here!" and banked away as a round or two hit them. "That's Bo Din! Lots of VC activity in this area!" It was at that moment that Quinn saw the mission on the edge of the village, the tiny church, the small group of people in the courtyard, Viet Cong moving up the street. "It's a nun with a dozen kids," Jackson said. Quinn grabbed the pilot by the shoulder. "We'll have to put down and get them." "We'd be lucky to get off again," the pilot shouted. "Look down the road!" There were Viet Cong everywhere, at least 50, swarming between the houses, hurrying to the mission. "Courtyard's too small. I'd have to land in the street. It won't work." "Okay, just drop me off. Then get the hell out of here and bring in the heavy brigade." "You're nuts!" Quinn looked down at the nun in her white tropical habit. "We can't leave that woman or those kids. Just do it." He stuffed the pockets of his camouflage jacket with flares and grenades, slung pouches of magazine around his neck, and found his M16. Jackson fired a long burst down the street that scattered the Viet Cong and knocked several down. The helicopter hovered just above the ground, and Quinn jumped. "I guess I'm nuts, too," and Jackson followed him, clutching an M16, a belt of magazines around his neck, a medical bag over his shoulder. There was a storm of firing as the Viet Cong started up the street again, and the two Americans ran to the entrance of the courtyard where the nun was coming forward with the children. "Back, sister!" Quinn called. "Get back!" He pulled his grenades out and tossed one to Jackson. "Together!" They pulled the pins, counted to 3, stepped out, and lobbed. The explosions were deafening. A number of Viet Cong went down, the rest retreated for the moment. Quinn turned to the nun. She was in her early 20s, with a pale and pretty face. When she spoke, it became clear she was English. "Thank God you came. I'm Sister Sarah Palmer. Father De Silva is dead." "Sorry, sister. There's only the two of us. The helicopter's gone for help, but God knows how long it will take." Jackson fired a burst down the road and called, "What the hell do we do? We can't..."